you think about feasibility, you think about all the different things that can go wrong, whatever it is that you're working on, and then you just end up doing nothing. You just end up doing nothing. I mean, we all have ideas go through our minds in our lives that we just push aside and we cast aside and we say, that's never really going to work. And then you see someone else do it, and it really does. The biggest kind of failure is to think there's someone out there with more time and money to get what you want to get done. One of the things that we did was don't consider feasibility.
Hi, welcome to Engineering a Startup. I'm Akash Goyal, and this podcast is really just part of my journey of building a startup of my own. And along the way, I'm learning so much from all kinds of amazing startup people. And this podcast is just a way to share their stories. Today's amazing person is Adam Sheikh. He's a student at the University of Toronto studying peace, conflict, and justice. And he started a nonprofit in his first year called Aegis. And what Aegis does is it provides cooling vests to construction workers in the Middle East who are facing all kinds of health issues working in extremely hot conditions. It's really pretty amazing what Adam has accomplished. This all started when his first year professor told their class to go find a devastating fact. And this is the fact that Adam came up with. But he really didn't have any kind of solution for it for months. And the solution happened to hit him when he was watching Adam Savage from Mythbusters wearing an alien costume. So you never really know where a great startup idea might come from. Adam's story is really awesome. He shares lots of really great insights into all aspects of building a startup. So without further ado, please welcome Adam Sheikh.
I'm Adam Sheikh, currently in my third year at U of T on St. George campus downtown, studying a little program called Peace, Conflict, and Justice. I'm also, and kind of more the reason I'm here, I started up a nonprofit in my first year of university called Aegis, and what we do is we're trying to get these devices that we make called cooling vests to construction workers in the Middle East. The conditions there and kind of where we're targeting, Dubai, Qatar, are often in excess of 50 degrees Celsius, and workers working in these conditions suffer a variety of health issues as a result of working in those sort of extremely warm and hot conditions. And what our vests do is they lower workers' body temperatures and are able to prevent them from experiencing those issues. And the primary kind of problem that we're trying to prevent from occurring is workers' deaths as a result of heart issues, heart complications, and heart attacks. And that is largely heat-induced. And so the general premise of our organization is, we want to get these cooling vests, these devices, to as many workers in the Middle East as possible, and thereby try and prevent their deaths while on the job from a variety of heat-induced heart issues.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, so were you involved with like the creation of these vests as well, or is that something that already exists?
So I don't have a very technical background. The way the idea to even pursue this thing kind of came about was I was in a first-year class in my university called Monk One. It's a small seminar. And the professor asked all of us to go out and find some sort of issue, to find a quote-unquote devastating fact. Okay. Sort of one data point, one problem, sum it up in a sentence, come and present it, and go out and solve it in one semester. Mine was at around 7,000 workers were expected to die in Qatar by 2022 when the World Cup starts. And for a good solid month and a half, I was getting nowhere. I was just kind of spinning the wheels, nothing was happening. And then around, sometimes ideas strike at the weirdest of moments. I was watching YouTube around 2 a.m. and sometimes you end up on that part of YouTube that you don't typically explore. and I came across a video of I don't know if you know a guy named Adam Savage. He did that Mythbusters thing for a little while.
Yeah. And
so he had a video at Comic-Con. Nothing against Comic-Con or comic books, but I don't ever really read them, so I don't know what I was doing there watching this thing. But in the video, he was wearing a costume to dress up as sort of an alien type thing. And then underneath that kind of costume, he was wearing a vest because, the actors on set who were wearing this costume in the movie or the TV show, whatever it was, when it was actually being recorded, were fainting of heat exhaustion. And so his idea was on the Comic-Con kind of thing, when he's walking around in this costume, since it's so big and bulky, he's going to wear something like that to prevent him from having those issues, and it worked. And so that's how the idea struck. I'm sorry, I feel like I went on a little bit of tangent. This is heading toward...
That's awesome.
What was exactly the question again?
I don't even know. I think the question was like, did you come up with the vest?
Yes. So I saw that, and that is what kind of was the original premise, the original idea for what the vest would be. And then I don't have a technical background, as I noted to you before.
Yeah.
And I called up a few of my friends who were engineers. Originally, the team I wanted to put together for Aegis were several people with engineering industrial design backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
But I very quickly realized that what we were trying to make, it'd be better served if I was to put a team together of people who could do the health analysis to understand the kind of health benefits of the product, who could help us with the marketing, the branding, and the web design, and that, the people that I was trying to put together, if they were kind of very honest, and they were very honest about it, and I appreciated that, they didn't really have the background needed. Mm-hmm. Even though, first year, second year, third year undergraduate, engineering students, they needed more experience.
Yeah.
Or needed, because it's a very, very niche area, really. So it was just on LinkedIn messaging, and then eventually I found a company called Inutech based in the Netherlands, and then they agreed after a couple of Skype calls to help us work things out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you say that, what do you mean work things out? Like, how does your arrangement with this company in the Netherlands work?
Yeah, sure. So originally, what they said, they make a variety of cooling products. Mm-hmm. So they make sort of vests that cyclists in the Tour de France wear. Okay. They make a certain type of vest that is used by a Dutch national soccer team, the Dutch army. So the idea of cooling vests are not really new. I mean, it's technology has been around for quite some time.
Yeah.
And it manifests itself in a number of different ways for a number of different purposes, and they're constructed differently and whatnot. And so what we wanted to do, our role is really just to create the best cooling vest for this market, for the Middle East, that serves the purposes we aim to kind of have them serve. Mm-hmm. And so we couldn't exactly at that point ask Inutech to construct this vest that is ideal for the market with having no capital. Mm-hmm. So University of Toronto students with like a couple grand in the bank and no other partners. So what can we really ask them to do? So really what it boiled down to initially was the relationship was they're going to give us a very significant discount on their existing kind of cheapest product, which was this thing called just kind of the evaporative kind of cooling vest. It's just the Nylac vest is what it was called. You soak it in water, you pull it out, you put it on your body, and as kind of you're working in the heat, the water evaporates from kind of the ambient heat and your own body's heat, and then kind of it cools you. Very, very simple, good product, but in the conditions in the Middle East where it's so hot, the water evaporates in a period of 1.5 or 2 hours as opposed to 5 or so, which is really what you need per soak. Mm-hmm. So initially that was the relationship, but since then it's really changed. After our first testing in the Middle East, we've redesigned what it is that we need our vest to do. And we rethought what it is we need to do, to have the vest do in terms of functionality, and they've helped us accomplish that in terms of design.
Yeah.
So really our role has been understanding the market, understanding the health issues and kind of problems workers face, understanding the impact of the vest on that, understanding how the site kind of operates, what day-to-day life is like, what would be needed from the vest, and then being able to provide all that information and some suggestions on how that could take shape to Inutech, and they help us really form that. And because we're a partner with them, we're not only just a client, we're a partner. They give us, they do all of this, really. It's kind of one of their kind of corporate social responsibility sort of things they see it as. Yeah.
That's awesome. So how does the vest work now? How's it evolved since then?
The premise in terms of how it functions is exactly the same. Okay. No different.
The evaporative cooling?
Yeah, you soak it in water, you pull it out, and it seems almost like stupidly simple when you think about it.
Yeah.
It really does. So in the West here, if you were to give kind of a cooling vest to, let's say, a guy who's up on your roof putting down new shingles, the temperature, if it's evaporative, just regular evaporative cooling, but the temperature, even in the summer, is not all that crazy. Mm-hmm. And their bodies aren't going to be all that hot. So really what you have is a product that's more of a comfort-based sort of tool, comfort-based product. It just cools them out a little bit. But when you insert in that environment where it's having to work so hard, where the water is evaporating so quickly, the cooling that it produces in relation to kind of, how hot the climate is, it transforms into something else.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the idea was first, we need to make it so it is able to offer the maximum amount of possible cooling with these new conditions. Because what it was designed for before was sort of this Western, maybe it's 30 degrees Celsius type thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we needed to change the fabric. So it was able to hold more water and kind of cool more.
Okay.
So we experimented a couple different things. It was really a balance of, if you make it, let me put it like this. The evaporative fabric is basically like a diaper.
Mm-hmm.
It soaks up water, and then it eventually, as the heat comes in contact with it, releases it.
Mm-hmm.
If you make it completely like a diaper, you just have this saggy, wet thing that's on you.
Mm-hmm.
If you make it so it doesn't hold any water, it has no point. So it's about reaching that kind of good middle point, that good balance.
Mm-hmm.
And also, when doing all that, you have to consider that this can't be restricted. This is another layer for a worker who is running about this site doing a number of different things.
Yeah.
And let's say they're in a welding tent, it has to be constructed in a way that sparks fly off and they hit the vest. It doesn't burn a hole through it.
Mm-hmm.
Or if we are assuming, if we're going to assume that it's okay for it to burn a hole through, it cannot impede the function of the. So those are all things in terms of construction that we changed, and we have arrived at different fabric, and we've changed the thickness very 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 minutely. We've also put high visibility striping on the vests themselves, because we realized that workers were just having to wear a high vis vest over it anyways. So we figured we may as well just integrate that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really been it. It's just been about the fabric and that, and then also being able to now put branding of companies on the product itself. Yeah. Because if we don't do that, they're going to put another vest on again. So.
Yeah. Cool. So you got this company in the Netherlands that's like creating the vest, and then how do you make sure it gets to the right people who can actually use it? Like, how does that part of it work?
Sure. So if I'm going to be honest, I mean, when most people think about what our organization would have been doing, because we started around a year and a half ago, maybe. Mm-hmm. And what you would assume that our organization would be doing, because the way I pitched, the way it sounds like this was a very complete idea from the get-go. It sounds like it could have worked. We would have been focusing on scaling. Uh-huh. But we really haven't. Our focus has really been twofold thus far. Now the focus is on scaling. But our focus has been twofold. It's been first, being able to make the health case. Because a lot of people can just make the general kind of, it's going to improve workers' quality of life. They're a little bit cooler. But where the argument for it becomes strong, and in our organization, the reason it would actually see it as worthwhile to push this forward is if you can show a health impact for vest use, positive health impact. And that's what our first summer was all about. It was all about highlighting that health impact, which we did very successfully. More data from this summer has been collected to help better illustrate that. But we were able to see decreases in blood pressure, decrease in number of workers with high blood pressure, decreases in kind of, where workers' kind of core temperature was on average, which, has health benefits. And then the second kind of summer, or last summer, was very, very focused on making a financial case. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to say to a company, this will ensure, your workers aren't getting sick as commonly as they do, or aren't suffering from the health issues that they currently are. But it's another thing to also say that this will help impact your profits. Mm-hmm. And really, I mean, company, that's your bottom line. Mm-hmm. So we needed to construct a case for this out of something that was solid. And kind of what we've arrived at now is this health component, which is, very clear and apparent now, and this financial component, which is, if we're able to, measure concrete pouring on a construction site, how long does it take with a vest? How long does it take without a vest? I mean, the biggest issue construction companies are now facing, and we've met with some people on some very, very big projects in the Middle East, some of the biggest there are, and the biggest issue they're facing in terms of meeting deadlines is workers are feeling sick, workers are not able to get very much done in these kind of hotter months. Mm-hmm. And so this goes beyond just kind of a comfort thing. It goes to, the health level, of course, and also goes to the level of, being able to make these companies meet their deadlines. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we did the last while. Now we're focused on scaling. Now we're focused on, we have a list of, X number of companies that, 40 or so companies that we're reaching out to, and we're trying to get this moving. We have the product finalized. We have the training procedures finalized, which is a big thing. You wouldn't think it, but all you really do with it is you soak it in water, right?
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you underestimate the complexity of things when you're trying to pass, this information off to others, and things can go really, really wrong, as we've learned from our experience when you don't invest a significant amount of time properly training people. And so those are lessons that we've started learning over this year and a half. What will the training procedures need to look like? What is the health case to be made? What is the financial case to be made? And now we finally arrived at a point where we, I think, are properly positioned to ramp up scaling. And our kind of best producer also sees that, and they've given us a donation of $10,000 to help spur that forward. And we've been getting a lot of other support. And so this summer is really our time to shine, I think.
Yeah.
And to get things moving.
That's awesome. So how do the finances work? Is it based completely through the company in the Netherlands, or?
So we set the rate with that company. We negotiate it. We are not sort of buying product as a distributor and reselling. It's private label. Mm-hmm. Our logo is put on the product. Others will not be buying it. And so we are in a very favorable position in terms of how we want to price things. Our how we price things really boils down to this: minimum amount that Inutech, whatever it is that they can deal with, that they can take.
Yep.
A very, very small margin just to fund sort of travel and reaching out to new people, reaching out to new contacts in the industry and others who are relevant to helping us scale. Mm-hmm. And that's really it. I mean, my team is a bunch of university students. None of us are paid. Mm-hmm. If I have 10 or so people on the team, not everyone works consistently. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But if someone has an hour here, 2 hours there, 3 hours there, we're in that state now where we can afford to have people just chip in time when they can. Mm-hmm. And with the way that we've been running things, we don't really see the need at this point to have anybody kind of be brought on full time.
Right.
Because when I'm not working, my partner Jordan will cover the load. So it's almost as though we kind of pushed together to make this team of like 3 constantly working people who had to go beyond just regular 9 to 5. But so we don't really have a need for a high margin, and we really just take enough to help us continue pushing our efforts and continue to scale.
That's really cool. So you were in first year, you're in this course, your professor tells you to go off, find a problem, and you come up with this problem of workers dying working in such hot conditions. How did you take the next step of like, okay, I want to start something to do something about that?
It wasn't until my December kind of break in between semesters.
Okay.
Where I was kind of sitting around miserably bored. And I had a couple of the readings, I think, from my sociology course that was continuing on for the next semester, and I was trying to start them. And, I just couldn't. I was done with it. I wanted to consider something else. I wanted to do something else. So I just called up a bunch of my closest friends, and we all got together, and I told them about what I had been working on for the last semester. And I told them that, I thought that maybe it could work. And I honestly didn't feel much enthusiasm. So things really, maybe I should have done a better job to pass on that enthusiasm, but things didn't really come together for that semester. There was a lot of thought from my end in terms of, what is it that I would be offering? How can I bring people on board? What would I need? And eventually, I boiled it down to a couple of key things. I needed, in the short term, I needed some financing to get something launched for the summer. I needed a partner who would allow me to put some vests on workers in their construction site. And I needed someone to help me make this damn thing because the people I was talking to weren't going to get it done. And then when I got back to uni, I just kind of went around my dining hall talking to friends who I thought would be relevant to, what it was that I needed, getting them on board. And, I had no idea. I mean, we've all done kind of school projects. I didn't realize how difficult team management really was, especially, if they're your friends and you don't see people getting stuff done in time. how do you manage that? I mean, how do you not turn yourself into a dictator? Well, I got called a dictator, so apparently I wasn't doing all too okay of a job at that point. But essentially, it was just, have this group of people that I brought together meet frequently, every week. Try to get a site together, because I mean, when you're trying to find partners and you're a bunch of University of Toronto students, you don't have any legitimacy, especially if you don't even have an organization. And so, what is the way that you can project legitimacy? Well, a website seemed it to me.
Yep.
So, got a website started. Realized that I'm going to need to incorporate this thing if I want to call myself a nonprofit. The incorporation. Nothing was done in sort of an all that planned of a way. It was just this is our end result. It's pretty damn clear.
Yeah.
Every time there's an obstacle, jump over it. So we need to project some legitimacy. Let's get a website. We all say we're not profit on our website. We need incorporation. We want incorporation. We may as well also get a bank account set up, because that's going to be useful in the future. So we got a bank account set up. And so just sort of these steps naturally just sort of fell into place. And then next thing you know, you have a website, you have a bank account, you have a team who's, 2 people are looking at the health stuff. One guy's doing the design work. One other person is with me trying to figure out the strategy going forward. And you have something that's functioning. And it just kind of, it takes a couple months, and it takes a lot of mapping stuff out on pieces of paper in your dorm room, and trying to figure out where it is that you're heading. And I feel like, I'm right now doing this sort of incubator thing with a bunch of students at the University of Toronto, and these are some really, really bright kids. And our last session was on, not this Friday, but the past one, was on how to build a website. And a lot of people, I mean, you need to have a sense of where it is that you're going fairly early on. I mean, not in very, very concrete terms. I feel like you have to have a sense of stages, when it comes to building a social enterprise. You have to have a sense of, in this first kind of whatever it is, I want to pilot something, I want to go initially do something, I want it to kind of grow into this, and eventually when it comes to scalability, I want it to become this. And people hate business plans nowadays. People don't want to draw them up. And so when it comes to motivating people to actually do something and being able to actually actualize what it is that they're working on, I think a website's a great way to do it. So our last session on websites was, when it came to the projects page, if you look at my projects page on my website, it's just a bunch of different things that we're engaged in right now. But initially, when I first launched it, because I didn't have anything to show for myself, it was 3 stages. It was phase 1 was this Vest pilot thing. Phase 2 was kind of, I think, making new partners and kind of getting together the relevant support that was sort of needed. And then phase 3 was about actually going out and scaling it. And so being able to map that out, I think, is super important. I think that's something that websites do. Yeah.
So you mentioned that incubator. Is that the Monk Social Incubator?
Yeah, it is. Essentially, the thing was launched not this year, but last year.
Okay.
A good friend of mine named Karash, he started up. He's now he was really kind of the guy that sort of mentored me and kind of coached me through that whole process of kind of setting up my nonprofit. He had something super down to earth, chill guy. He started when he was in high school, a thing called Solar for Life.
Okay.
Giving out kind of solar lights and that sort of stuff in I think South Africa and a bunch of other places. And he has been involved in a number of different kind of social kind of enterprise related stuff, and has also gone to journalism now, interviewing people like Noam Chomsky and whatnot. And he's now at Columbia Journalism for a year doing his master's. And so he's the guy who originally started with a professor of mine named Teresa Kramart, who's the director of the Monk One program, that course that I told you that initially led to this idea. And so I've been taking it on this year with a couple of people. It is essentially just about, it's a really just simple idea. If we take around 20 or so students, 20 or 25 or so students who are super bright, who've been led into one of the most kind of select undergraduate kind of seminars at the University of Toronto. There's all the program itself is directed, come up with big ideas to solve world issues, whatever. Mm-hmm. They clearly have this interest. If we throw at them a couple of resources, if we give them access to a grant writer, if we give them access to a graphic designer or web designer, we give them lessons on kind of the basic business kind of stuff, like website design, how to bring partners together, how to send an email that is, going to help you push forward your work, how to, interact with people at conferences and get the connections that are relevant, how to do consumer research, how to find your niche market, that sort of stuff. Just kind of the basic, groundwork. We give them that. We give them access to this ad hoc team of graphic designer or whatever, these people, and we give them one-on-one coaching. This is the most important bit, is the process of idea creation. I mean, it's very, very difficult, and it's something I've been thinking a lot about over the last couple of weeks. It's difficult to, it's simple, relatively simple, to give someone advice, to give someone information on the whole business development process. There's a lot of resources there for that. Mm-hmm. What's a lot more difficult is being able to give advice on the idea creation process. How do you break that down? Yeah. What are processes and what are kind of ways that you can go about exploring that? I mean, one activity that I do with them, or did with them on the first day was, I mean, smartest people, as Karash said, this is a line that he told me, are the biggest killers of their own ideas. I'm sure someone else has probably said at some point. But, you think about feasibility, you think about all the different things that can go wrong, whatever it is that you're working on, and then you just end up doing nothing. Mm-hmm. You just end up doing nothing. I mean, we all have ideas go through our minds in our lives that we just push aside and we cast aside and we say, that's never really going to work. And then you see someone else do it. Yeah. And it really does. Mm-hmm. The biggest kind of failure is to think there's someone out there with more time and money to get what you want to get done.
Yeah.
One of the things that we did was don't consider feasibility. Up in the air, whatever it is, here's this issue, go out and solve it however the hell you want. Don't worry about money. Don't worry about political support. Don't worry about anything. And then after they do that, then we throw in each level of kind of filtration after they've already come up with that initial idea. Okay, now let's consider like political support, which is clearly someone needed for this. How would you alter this in structure to meet that criteria? Okay, so they boil it down to something else. Okay, now let's talk about financial constraints and how does you go about funding this thing. Okay, now let's morph it again, and then eventually you arrive at something. And that's one tool that we've been using. And so being able to coach people through that process, I think, is a really interesting bit about the incubator. And I've been thinking a lot about how it is that we can scale it, because, I mean, the value that I'm seeing these kids get and the ideas that they're coming with such a range of topics from, factory workers in China and masks to prevent them from inhaling the stuff that they're inhaling, new structures for refugees from Myanmar living in Bangladesh to be supplied to the UNHCR that, are low cost, but at the same time provide adequate protection from the elements. I'm just really thinking that if I can find a way to scale this and get, these resources and this information and a way to do this online, a way to answer these questions online, and a way to communicate, this and work through this idea creation process online, that there really is a lot of good to be done there.
Yeah, I mean, the incubation of ideas is a really interesting thing. Like, the more people I talk to, the general thing seems to be don't get hung up with trying to come up with a perfect or great idea, because startups seem to be more about the execution anyway. Like, two people can start with the exact same idea, and really the person who's going to succeed is whoever executes on it better. I think in terms of picking an idea, the one thing that does make sense is picking something that you're actually passionate about, so that you have the fuel to keep going.
At the same time, I mean, I think a lot of the people that you have on your podcast are just in general kind of entrepreneurs. They're working on regular sort of business-oriented stuff. What I'm trying to do is purely social enterprise. Mm-hmm. It's purely you go out, you see an issue, you see some statistic, you see some problem, and then you're trying to solve it. Mm-hmm. And these problems aren't issues that aren't known largely. I mean, mine was relatively unknown. It's an obscure niche sort of thing that people here in the West wouldn't really know much about. But a lot of these topics, like factory workers in China who are suffering from stuff, these are known topics. So I can't expect them to come up with solutions to problems just by themselves on a blank piece of paper, when these are seemingly very complex problems that other people have not yet been able to solve. Mm-hmm. That's why I highlight this idea creation process, because in relation to the issues I'm trying to have them tackle, there isn't others that have done this. And the reason is because the process of idea creation is difficult. Mm-hmm. When it comes to these issues. It's not so much I want to generate X amount of sales or thing of this product. It's really about how can I come up with an innovative and creative way to address it that no one else has kind of managed to put together before, because that's the only way that you can really get it done. Mm-hmm.
So, does social enterprise mean not for profit?
No. So what I mean by that is, I mean, you can have a social venture or an enterprise. I mean, that is so not a social venture. We can have a social enterprise that is not for profit. I mean, mine is not for profit.
Mm-hmm.
But really, what I'm trying to get to when I say social enterprise is some sort of organization that works to address a social issue
Mm-hmm.
and does so in a manner that it is able to support itself. It is not reliant on donor funding. It is not reliant on consistent feeding of money from someone else into it to have its operations take place.
Right.
And so the way that we've been able to fund ourselves is through this margin on the vests, and similarly, the kinds of ideas that we're trying to develop here are able to fund themselves. I mean, obviously, initially you need some seed money or some grants or something like that to kickstart your work, but we're just trying to get people to create organizations, whether it be nonprofit or for-profit ventures, that work towards addressing social issues in a way that allows them to sustain themselves. That is what I would call a social enterprise.
But, just thinking about what you're doing, I think it's really cool that it's not for profit. And I'm curious, what drove you in that direction? Because, I mean, there's obvious reasons why something like this, with like this kind of social benefit, it makes sense to make it not for profit. But at the same time, it seems like it's easier to scale something where there is that economic driving force behind it. If you are making profit, then you can reinvest that in the company rather than relying on, a company that provides you with the vest at at a very thin margin, right? Like, not every company is going to be able or willing to do that. So, I'm just curious, what's the thought process behind, should this be, I want to solve this problem. Should I tackle it from a not-for-profit point of view, or should I try to build a business around it, but still try to solve that same problem?
So I would kind of walk through why is I initially chose to make my thing a nonprofit, and the reason is really just that when it comes to here in the West, it's easier to get initial support, initial money right off the ground. We have nothing to launch an organization if you're a nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Google ads, gave us a bunch of money per month. I think it was like $10,000 a month just for being a nonprofit to cast out free ads because we're a nonprofit.
Yeah.
The original money that we got to launch our pilot project, I don't know if we would have got it if we had not framed ourselves as a nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
Our partner Inutech, I don't know if they would have agreed to be our partner if we were a for-profit business like every other company that they dealt with.
Yep.
When it came to Six Construct, if they just thought we were in it for, because that was the big thing, was would being a nonprofit be able to highlight to people that the reason we're trying to explore this thing is not because we're after creating this sort of market that doesn't actually exist, that isn't, this need that doesn't actually need to be addressed, but it was a way of communicating our sincerity in this one word.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least that's what we were trying to make it like. And initially it was great. Initially it got the construction company on board. It got, the vest partner on board. It got kind of all the relevant people, the funders, everyone was on board. And I think that this idea of us being a nonprofit, being there for, largely, not largely, but often this is not the case necessarily, that we were out there with the best interests of heart, because I feel like a lot of time nowadays you see a lot of kids who start up nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing it really for nothing more than let me get that line of founder on the resume. and it actually goes a step worse than that, because it can be a big disadvantage too. And I would say that after, you're very right when you mention the idea of scaling, after that initial little high at the beginning,
mm-hmm.
there tend to be a lot of cons. I think particularly in our case, a lot of people view nonprofits very poorly.
Mm-hmm.
They, especially within the industry we're trying to work in. I mean, you see, we're not Amnesty, we're not a kind of NGO like them, human rights oriented NGO, but the word nonprofit is heard, and you're immediately associated with a lot of organizations that a lot of people that we're trying to reach out to don't like.
Yeah.
I think Amnesty's great. I think Human Rights Watch are great. This is my personal kind of take on this. This is not me saying anything about what my organization feels, but but they're not. They have a role to play in that they apply pressure. They apply continuous pressure to drive improvement, whatever kind of circumstance, whatever issue that we're looking at. But we need to present ourselves as pragmatic, and so we can have that cooperation. So the idea that we are this nonprofit that would be collaborating with these NGOs and these other people who weren't businesses, we weren't here for a clear purpose. We were here for kind of social betterment, quote unquote. You can turn yourself into this kind of neo-colonialist sort of thing that's out there to just grill a community for what it is that they're doing, as opposed to this partner who's trying to benefit here from collaboration for a monetary reward. So when you get to the higher level, then it becomes a little bit more complicated, at least in our case. What do I tell the people who are in my incubator when it comes to taking how to make their organization take shape? Well, it really just divides up into that. I would say break it into the long-term and short-term sort of things that how you see it affecting your long-term and your short-term. Because initially when we made it as a nonprofit, I mean, we were only thinking about the short-term. We weren't thinking all too much about the consequences in the long-term. And I mean, sometimes it's difficult to project. I mean, we couldn't have really considered the climate in the UAE based on the limited local knowledge that we had would be very hostile towards nonprofits. And so sometimes it's just, you have to come up with a vague plan of how you see whatever it is that you are fitting in within your overall long-term and short-term kind of objectives, and then just sort of take a gamble. In the end, it's always going to be a bit of a gamble because there's information that you do not have that you cannot consider at this very point. And if you try to consider it all, as you said before, some other people will say, you just end up killing your own stuff and you don't ever really get anything done.
So how do you overcome that hostility or negative view against not-for-profit?
It really just comes to framing things right. It really just comes to not really trying to say the word and just try and call yourself a social enterprise. Because that it sounds very, very, very simple. But just that word, switching, I had a conversation with someone who is the son of a very, very big developer. Before a conference that we were supposed to speak at, that he had funded. Big deal, big people of industry there, royal family members in the UAE there, and we had a solid 50-minute conversation about were we going to call ourselves a nonprofit, and that's when I really got to understand the heat of what it really means to call yourself a nonprofit and the attitudes that are held there. And so we were just kind of sitting around, and eventually I just realized it's not worth all this. We may as well just say we're a social enterprise, because I mean, all they want is that we are something that is not going to require donor funding, that is able to sustain itself, that is able to continue its operations, but has a social goal and focus. So we're still a nonprofit, but we just didn't really try to highlight it.
Yeah, I think that idea of being self-sustainable is really important, so that you're not constantly you're not a charity. Yeah, it's a functioning organization. So. Yeah.
And it's also really liberating in terms of you being actually able to pursue your objectives.
Yeah, instead of just chasing funding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you have a limited team, not a limited team, but when you have a team of undergraduate students like we have, who are only able to put in so many hours, and you have one or two kind of key people pushing the thing forward, you don't really have time to waste.
Can you tell me about SamePage?
SamePage.
Yeah.
I think I very recently took that from my my LinkedIn list and put it on no longer active. SamePage was a simple idea. I think all of us at some point have gone to rate my professor or something like that.
Yeah.
See the easiness ranking and kind of the various metrics that are there, and kind of assess, what it is how it is that this professor is viewed. But the idea for SamePage was, how do we give students the ability to see not only how, others would review a course, would review a professor, but instead how they themselves, based on their prior knowledge, and their interests, would fit in a course. Because it's out of this information on how the professor's easiness scores, whatever it is that you're making a decision, very unspecific to you, on this kind of limited information in terms of whether or not you should take a course. And so The idea was really just if we gave people a very, very short quiz of a few swipes on a phone, would you be able to create something that, that students could get a ranking and see themselves in the position to be kind of all the other students that take this kind of quiz thing, be able to see where does they naturally sort of place in this gradient in terms of, their prior knowledge, their prior experience, their interest in going to this course and whether or not they should take it based off of this metric that we give them.
Mm-hmm.
We're planning on getting together the relevant data that we needed and have these quizzes designed by the professors that taught those very courses. And if I'm to be frank, the organization didn't last long. It seems like it lasted a while just because, if I'm very frank, like the Wix subscription we have on the website auto-renewed itself. That's why the thing is still up. But I had a lot going on with Aegis at the time. So when I started this with my buddy, I told him that I'm gonna when we need help or when you give me concrete tasks, but I can set up strategy now with you, but we're gonna give you the title of CEO. CEO of what? But we're gonna give you the title of CEO, so you had a little bit of an ego boost, and he felt like he was in the place to doing the strategy making, and you define things, and I follow your lead. And sometimes trying to, my dad and his brother experienced themselves. When you bring close friends or you bring family into, things can really go wrong. And we're still friends, but he really didn't put in the effort, and things really never moved along. And then in the end, SamePage is really just a waste of around a couple $100 on domain fees and website setup and a guy who invested a lot of time in graphic work. So that is SamePage.
Yeah.
And we all, everyone has, experiences like that, and that's, being able to go out and have something flop like that thing flopped. You learn from it. You learn from it a lot.
I've heard investors who say they only want people who have a failed startup as well. Like, I think it's really important.
Yeah.
You realize really quickly that to actually do anything, it takes a ton of effort. Like it's not hard to set up a website quickly, and then it's like, and now what?
Yeah.
So why do you think it didn't work out? Do you think it would have been better if you weren't trying to do Aegis at the same time? It seems like it'd be really hard to do two things while being in school.
I would say, I can't really say, right? If the effort were to have been put in, the thing could have still flopped in the same amount of time that it did. It was there for it existed, quote unquote, for a year or so, or a little bit over that maybe. But I don't know. It's hard to say. The idea was contingent on a bunch of different things. One was being the collaboration of professors, and so there's a lot up in the air. We're at the very, very early stages when stuff just sort of stopped moving forward. Communication wasn't taking place on the level that it should have been.
Mm-hmm.
And you can only, in that sort of relationship, and it goes both ways, I'm sure, but in that sort of relationship, you can only push your friends so much to get stuff done before it turns into a full-time job for you, and at the same time takes its toll on the friendship. So you sometimes just realize that it's better just not pursuing this, because it's going to be a time sink for you. And so, I think that was a realization sort of fairly early on.
Mm-hmm.
Just in terms of the working dynamic. Whether or not the idea could have been pulled off by someone else, maybe. But there was a lot to be still worked out.
Yeah.
So I can't really say.
Hard question to answer, but so when you're working with other people, how do you fight that feeling of like being a dictator, or it's like, these guys aren't working as hard as I'm working, or I want to work on this.
Sure.
But they're also, my friends or my teammates or whatever. How do you balance that? How do you approach that?
Good friend of mine had a strategy that was hire him as fast as you fire him when it came to running his nonprofit, because he figured when you bring people new on board, They have the energy, they have the drive, and then as soon as they lose it, which will probably be in 2 or so weeks, you get rid of them and you bring on a new set of people.
Mm-hmm.
That I feel like is just a horrible strategy.
Yeah, it sounds crazy.
Yeah. But I'm glad it worked for him. So I guess really you can do whatever works for you. But in terms of me, I think the first thing is just accepting the fact, or at least with the teams that I've put together, and the teams that I'm having kind of my students sort of put together, being able to accept the fact that people aren't going to be as committed as you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Elon Musk, is known for setting just ludicrous deadlines because he thinks of things in terms of, the time frame at Tesla, he can accomplish something.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't seem to realize that he wouldn't, that others don't have that same capacity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that works, that works for him. But I think it's important to at least recognize the fact that not everybody is as committed to what it is that you're working on as you, and that has to be okay. You have to be okay with that if you are running an organization that operates without paying anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I feel like a lot of projects and stuff that we're operating in kind of field of social enterprise at a very kind of low level are that's how they take shape. And so the first thing I would just say is be comfortable with you being the biggest driver of your project and no one wanting to stand up there beside you. That's okay, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
Second is constant communication, constant collaboration. Have weekly meetings, even if you don't have anything to say.
Mm-hmm.
You just block out that 2 hours and talk.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have anything to say in terms of what's currently going on, talk about what should go on.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about where things are headed. Make sure that everyone feels like, and it sounds so terribly cliche, but make sure people feel like their voices are being heard. And at the same time, when you have people that are throwing you off balance, that are rocking the ship, that are just generally screwing things up, be okay to let them go.
Mm-hmm.
Be okay to let them go quickly. When you have people that are continuously just creating problems and making your life difficult, and you're spending more time thinking, I mean, we're talking about being a startup and being kind of a social enterprise and being kind of at that low level when, if you're a charity, if you're just looking for money all the time, when are you going to invest the time in actually pursuing something and being able to grow your thing? If you're investing all your time and thinking about how your team is just, how you have this one person in your team who's just making you miserable, and that happened to me, let them go, even if they're your friend. Position very, very simply. We have one goal. It is to do X. It will have this benefit. And I really care about this, and as do a lot of people. And I'm not letting you go, and I'm not kicking you out because I don't like you. I'm kicking you out because you inhibit us from accomplishing this.
Mm-hmm.
And so framing everything in relation to your goals and your objectives becomes a way to put yourself above this kind of bickering and kind of constant, engaging in a kind of back and forth conflict.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one thing is being able to resolve it like that. Position everything in terms of your goals. Constant communication, and then acceptance of the fact that sometimes people, not sometimes, but always people are not going to be as committed as you, nor they should be, nor should they be. And the last thing I would say is be able to find that one person who can work alongside you, who you can constantly bounce ideas off of. And don't work too hard on trying to find that individual, but instead construct an organization or a team of people or 6 or 7 or something like that, and naturally they will make themselves known. Naturally you will see who it is that you're speaking to most, and then have room and be okay with bringing them on to also have a seat on the board of your nonprofit, and that's the way I've always done it. I mean, initially it was me and my buddy Dennis, and I gave him also a board seat. We both had board seats. We had an equal say in decisions, but we respected each other, and I bounced ideas off him. He went on the trip with me, invested the time, and then my second partner, then he left, and I brought Jordan on. Dennis still with us, but he kind of doesn't play as active of a role, so I brought someone else to fill that sort of spot. But I think having that one person to constantly bounce ideas off of, who has the same passion, or maybe a little bit less, but has around the same level of passion and care for what it is that you're doing, that you do, is also a great way to work through things.
Yeah. I think you may have already answered this, but the question I always like to close on is, if you had one piece of advice for anyone thinking about getting into entrepreneurship, or building any kind of organization, what would you tell them?
I think I already gave an Elon Musk reference one time. One more time.
He kind of comes up in every podcast, which
Does
is
it?
hilarious. Yeah, I mean, everyone references him, which is just shows, the impact he's had on the world. But
I'm actually going to say something that he said and then kind of run something a little bit counter to it.
okay.
So maybe not quite. He said something along the lines of, I think in some sort of little lecture tour of Tesla factory that he gave a bunch of students, said, someone asked, how do I know if I should really pursue this? And, this idea, should I really launch this thing? And he just said, something along the lines of, if you're not certain, don't do it. Something along the lines of, you should know. A lot of people talk a lot about, being able to, pursue whatever dreams you have and just go for it, whatever. But he kind of pushed this idea of be certain. Know what you want, go out, get it. If you don't have that drive, you don't have that certainty, don't worry about it, don't bother. I think that drive is certainly important. At the same time, I would nuance that and just say that my piece of advice is instead really, because I can't really speak to business in general in terms of starting a startup. I can speak to starting a social startup, and I wouldn't try to inflate what it is I know about. Find something that resonates with you. It just sounds like a typical Steve Jobs passion speech, but find something that resonates with you. Pursue it when you have the resolve to do so. And know that it's not going to be easy. Bring on a team of people who are going to be able to help you pursue that. And I guess, the biggest thing would just be care about what you're doing. If you don't care about it, if you don't have a team of people that are really supporting you, if you don't have money in the bank, if you don't have any partners secured, I mean, if your GPA is dropping by the semester for what is you're working on, what the hell are you doing? That's the idea that comes in your mind, and the only answer I feel like that can make you push past all of that is, I want to get this done. I want to get this sorted. This thing needs to be taken care of. No one else is doing it. So I'd say my one piece of advice is get in that mindset. Sorry, it's a big roundabout thing. But get into that mindset where it's, I need this to happen. Simple as that, point blank. I care about this. No one else is going to do it. If I want to see this world change, I'm the only one that can make it happen.
That's it for the podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and thank you, Adam, for taking the time to do this. It's really cool that a bunch of university students sitting in Canada can work with a company making vests in the Netherlands and deliver them to construction workers in the Middle East. It really just shows that pretty much anything is possible. I'm still not 100% sure how I feel about nonprofits, because it feels like if you are operating as a nonprofit, it means you're relying on some kind of unfair advantage to exist, like some kind of discount or something that, a normal for-profit company wouldn't have access to. And I always felt like that would lead to major inefficiencies, but maybe that's the only way for some things to get done. They just wouldn't happen if it was only for profit. And hearing a guy like Adam makes me believe that it is possible to do it in a sustainable way. One thing I really liked that Adam said was that nothing that they did was really planned out and well thought out necessarily. It's just every time they ran into an obstacle, whether they needed a website, whether they needed to incorporate, whether they needed a bank account, whether they needed new team members, whatever it was, every time they hit an obstacle, they just found a way to jump over it. And it reminded me of this quote at the end of The Martian, the movie The Martian, with Mark Watney or Matt Damon, where he says, in space travel, there's always going to be a time where everything goes south. Everything goes south. And you can either accept that or you can get to work. You solve one problem and then you solve the next problem. And if you solve enough problems, then you'll get to be successful. Or in the case of an astronaut, you'll get to come home. And I think that's all it is. There isn't a master plan that successful startups have. They just keep solving problems. Anyways, thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate it. If you have any thoughts about the show, comments, questions, if you want to be on the show, if you want to listen to more episodes of the show, please visit engineheiringastartup.com. You can also reach out on Twitter at enginehire. In case you're wondering how you can help the show, one great way is to tell a friend about it. Share this episode with somebody who you think would find it interesting. You can also subscribe to the show or leave a review. Those things seem to help more people find out about it, but yeah, no pressure. Anyways, as always, until next time, keep thinking. What will you create?